the first character is the cursive form of the character for wind. In Japanese, it's called fu. It's a really hard character to learn how to write. There's a lot of nuance in the way that you hold the brush, and this particular character is taking me quite a bit of time. I don't even proclaim to actually, be an expert in writing that character. I think that's part of the process of calligraphy, is sort of acknowledging that no matter how far you are in your calligraphic studies, that you're so far from where others have been. So it's really hard to sort of trot on new territory, and I think that is something that can be applied to all visual arts, right? I mean, basically, if you're a painter, finding completely new territory in the world of painting is extremely difficult to do. And when somebody does crack that code, hopefully the stuff is saleable, but not always, right? So there's a lot of emphasis now, especially institutionally, like the museums and the galleries that focus on social justice and that stuff, focus on content-oriented artwork rather than skilled technique. So the auction world is more concerned with usually skill, right? I think. I used to work for Takashi Murakami, and his paintings are extremely skilled, unbelievably huge, massively gorgeous paintings that are actually done with like hundreds and hundreds of silk screens, but he'll use really extravagant materials like platinum leaf. So you've probably heard of gold leaf, but he would actually use platinum leaf. And when you're talking about that kind of art world, it's very, very different than the institutional stuff that you see at the Whitney or MoMA even, which is often very focused on the content, and it usually has to kind of align to a social justice kind of commentary. There's definitely a lot of gatekeeping based on, your politics. So this character here is the character, or the block style character for wind, fu. It's what we just saw, the cursive version, so you can see that this is the fully expressed version. This one's kind of cool. I like this sharp end here. It's really hard to do that particular character. It took me years and years. I would say at least 5 years to kind of get the balance down. So this next character is one that I will admit I do not have down very well. And in this case, what I would do is keep practicing this character by itself over and over and over again on a piece of paper, on several pieces of paper, I guess. Until you get the balance down, you get the sort of stroke order down. That's also very important. By the way, when you're doing this type of calligraphy, I am not afraid of changing the stroke order up and going against the prescribed stroke order, just to kind of see what happens when I do that line first, and see how that affects the construction or the balance of the character. This one is the character for 10,000, Man. This one also took me quite a bit of time. I came from a calligraphic tradition in Japan that has these really audacious, large, kind of very strong characters. I've studied with other teachers in, for example, in New York City. I studied with a teacher from Shanghai, and his characters were very, very delicate. And he kind of immediately saw my characters and said, yeah, they're so like chunky. So it's just kind of based on who your teacher is and the style that they learned from. So it's kind of this traditional art that's handed down, or at least certain secrets are handed down generation to generation through these groups. I actually spent quite a long time in Japan studying Japanese calligraphy in the Shosenbu calligraphy group from Nagoya in Japan, obviously, in Aichi Prefecture. And I still study with them. In fact, I actually send 3 samples. I'll send the block style, the semi-cursive, and the cursive style. So 3 samples based on these things, which are called otehon, if you can see here. You got to keep practicing these characters over and over again. And I've been sending every month 3 samples, the kaisho, gyosho, and sosho, to Nagoya to be, kind of graded and then given from that you're given a ranking. I actually have worked through all the ranks that are available for my particular group. So the top rank is called Shihan. In Chinese, it's called Shufan. I don't, quote me on my Chinese pronunciation. Obviously Chinese Mandarin pronunciation especially is so difficult, right? With all the tones, the 5 tones. Not to mention just because Mandarin Chinese, kind of similar to Japanese too, has a kind of limited number of sounds. A lot of the words sound the same, but where a lot of the richness in the language comes from is actually the characters. I think that the characters are the way that you can really differentiate all those similar sounding words. I noticed that I'm doing the same set again, so I guess we'll continue on doing this one. And I'm going to work on this guy here. Let's go to the overhead real quick so you can take a look. Working here, you have to kind of plan your space. So when you put this guy in, and then there's going to be the same one. This is the character, I believe for King, or it has a little dash over there, it's King. But if I put this guy over here, I want to make sure that this bottom line has a little gap there, because the little roof here is going to be nested. Let's talk about how to do this section here. I'm going to stop, turn the brush slightly, tap, 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 and then pull out. And I have to kind of control myself so that I can kind of create a smoother edge. This one's, I give myself a C on that one. And we continue. So the next one, again, we're going to do, this is Man, 10,000. And what's interesting is these samples I get from Japan are usually based on the season, what's happening with nature in Japan or in Asia. All the poetry, in other words, all of these characters, the assemblage of characters comes from classical Chinese poetry. So it's kind of interesting because among the calligraphers, there's also a kind of a ranking system and a whole kind of pastime for translating these poems, because Japanese people can recognize the individual characters in this assemblage here, but they can't really understand what they mean together. So you can kind of, take a stab at it. But to get the exact meaning, you really need to have some education in Chinese, right? So, and some Japanese people have that ability, and some don't. So, anyways, and then the last one here is Matsu, and this is the character for pine tree. This radical over here on the left is the radical for tree. So whenever you see that, you know that it's some kind of tree. So I'll have this on the left side, which indicates, okay, it's a tree. And then it's kind of interesting, there's like a qualifier on the right side, and that'll tell you what kind of tree it is. And in this case, this radical indicates that it is a pine tree. And voila. Okay, so there's that one. Let's take a look from the base camera. Kind of see, not very good. I haven't really warmed up today. So the whole thing with calligraphy is you have to continue going over and over and over and over again. It really is, and I've said this in my other videos, it's like gymnastics where you have to first warm up, get yourself really, warm, and then basically you have to learn all the different parts of the routine, stick all the landings, and then again stick the landing at the end. And then make no mistakes throughout the entire time. And you can't plan on making no mistakes, right? Because there's no chance to correct mistakes. They happen and they're out there. The difference between calligraphy and gymnastics is that calligraphy will leave a trace, right? There's the trace of that memorization of a sort of physical movement of your body. Or your hand in this case. So, your body as expressed through the hand in a way. So, I find that calligraphy is one of those things that kind of is a good indicator of not only one's physical fitness, but mental fitness, right? So, I'm not sure exactly where I heard, but I had a friend in Japan, who said that calligraphy was a good way to stave off Alzheimer's and senility. I don't know how trustworthy that information is, but this character here is the character for Butsu, for the Buddha. I absolutely love this character. It takes a while to get the balance. I almost approached, because I didn't grow up writing these characters, I almost approach them when I'm trying to write them as if they're a tag, and I'm trying to copy someone else's tag, right? Like if you're tagging on a wall or something, right? And some of these have that same kind of expressive, it zooms in on making gesture with just line work, basically, right? But there's a system, a system to it, so that it looks like some kind of form of communication, some kind of letter or alphabet. So it's really important to follow those rules so that it looks like what it's supposed to be. And then once you have the rules down, you can sort of start bending them a tiny bit so that you can create your own individual style. This character here is another one of those characters that you can always tell what it's talking about slightly. Like even if you don't know the entire character, you can tell that top section up here is the radical for rain, so that you know it's some kind of weather phenomenon. It could be clouds, storms, whatever kind of thing. So it's difficult to say. But all right, let's move on to the next one. All right, and it's gonna be this guy here. And again, I get sent these from my teacher in Nagoya. She's about 70 probably now, but she's still incredibly precise with her calligraphy. It's and that sort of level of precision only comes from, not years but decades of practice over and over and over and over again. And what's nice also about calligraphy is that it's not something that, like gymnastics, that your body's going to break down and then you can't do it anymore. So, unless you get arthritis in your hands or something, but, it's one of those activities that you can continue doing your entire life, okay? So this set of characters here is going to focus on the fall. This is the character for fall here. Aki, it's made up of two radicals, and in this case, this doesn't have to do with trees, but this is the radical for tree here, and then fire. So I think it has more to do with the kind of fiery colors of fall, and that kind of correlates to the next character right here, which is the character for color. So we know that this poem, and again, I don't read Chinese, so I'm not, I can't tell you exactly what this is saying, but it's something about, fall colors. And then the next character here. And then right down. And even when you're working in this sort of abstracted style, you want to make sure that you're keeping the kaisho, the block version, in mind, so that they kind of, when you put them together, the semi-cursive style and the cursive style, and this particular one I'm doing now is the semi-cursive. This character here is for sound. And again, when you're learning these characters, feel free to kind of change up the stroke order a little bit if you need to, just to see what happens and see if you can kind of construct a character a little bit better. This next character, I'm going to admit right now, I'm not I'm not super 100% on this character, but let's do it. Here we go. And really, it's a matter of, for some of these complicated characters, learning the individual radicals, the individual elements, right? So this is one character by itself, this is another character. So learning them independently and then kind of learning to combine them together so that they look like they relate to each other. And voila. All right. And then in this case, you want to make sure that that this tail and this tail kind of correlate to them, to one another somehow, right? So if you were looking over this like a bird's eye view, you'd want this to somehow correlate with this. It's not bad. I say that the weight on this particular one is a little heavier than this, so I maybe on the next one I would make this much more weightier so that the two weights kind of match each other. So that's something that you just have to kind of learn through, again, doing these things over and over and over and over and over and over again. I would say I go through hundreds of sheets of paper per week. I usually say about calligraphy, one of the things is that it's not an eco-friendly activity, as far as that you go through a lot of paper, and in this case sometimes it's quite nice paper. This is the next set. This is social. This is the abstracted cursive style. I would say, this is my favorite, and it's actually probably favorite of a lot of calligraphers. In fact, I think the kind of true test of a calligrapher's ability, of course it's kaisho, but social is one of them as well, because you kind of have to balance it between the kind of wild, expressive abstraction and then making sure that it follows those rules so that it's actually legible, right? Because there's no point in making calligraphy that's completely opaque and that nobody could read. It has to be legible. Not always. I'm gonna retract that statement. There was a group of artists in the 20th century, probably the most notable of which was Cy Twombly, and he did these absolutely stunning paintings that look like children's scribbles. But when you really study the use of color and then the gestures in those scribbles, you see that they're extremely sophisticated, that they're not done by kids. And often the reaction people have to his work initially, especially those people who don't like contemporary art, is that his work looks childish. But the sort of theorem that his type of artists, his group of artists that were focused on calligraphy were kind of putting forward was that that calligraphy, that like, for example, if you take a pen and you just kind of scribble it on a piece of paper to see if it's working, and that little weird arabesque, that scribble that you've made, is sort of informed by your psychological or subconscious predilections or whatever, and somehow that's a window into your soul that's a little bit more, in a way, more how should I say, literal to your subconscious than letters, which are imposed, an imposed system based on a society. All right, where are we at? Let's see, I think we did all these. Okay, let's do this last one. This last set is this set here. Very cool. Another set with the character for wind. So, and again, when you're doing this social style, you want to make sure that you're pushing the brush very, very hard. So let's go to the overhead again. We'll start with wind. I'm going to really load my brush up a lot. And then, here we go. I'm going to push this brush super hard. And let the weird brush, the way that it kind of decides to go by itself as far as the point, the way you can see this looks almost like a little scalpel or a knife. I didn't do that necessarily. It kind of went into that shape by itself. But just go ahead and just use it. And that will give your calligraphy more expression. I used to, when I first started doing calligraphy, be really focused on trying to control the brush tip, the tip of the brush, and I ended up losing focus on the overall balance, the construction of the the sort of composition of the characters, and then the composition of all the characters on a page together. I lost focus of that because I was too focused on that detail of the brush. So the brush became the center of my focus, and then therefore obviously your calligraphy is going to suffer because of that. So let's do this one here. And this social style is a memorization about which parts to go fast and which parts to go slow. If you just kind of zip through the whole thing, you can definitely tell. And certain elements, like this dot, for example, or this here, or other parts of the calligraphy, cannot be achieved by going quickly. You have to go slowly. So it's not even a choice whether to go fast or whether to go slow. In many cases, that those particular brush techniques can be only achieved through a slow technique. So I think that's a good message for most people in their own artwork. It doesn't really matter about calligraphy. I always say calligraphy is just kind of a window into infinity, but you can't lose focus of the grander painting or sculpture or whatever you're doing by focusing on the detail work. So it's always important to kind of zoom in and then zoom out and then zoom in and then zoom out and then kind of compare those two views so that you kind of create a statue or a painting that can exist in those two planes, right? The kind of immediate plane and then the plane that's far away from you. So that's what I got to say about that. Take care.